many other...
Officials, right? Arab?
Hello there and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and as ever we have lots to get through, so we'll get cracking with the headlines. Hailing the new AUKUS alliance with Australia and the US to strengthen military capabilities in the face of a rising China, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the pact will help maintain peace in the Indo-Pacific. But AUKUS is already awkward as France calls Australia's decision to scrap a $66 billion submarine deal as a stab in the back. France's foreign minister says Canberra's decision to make a deal with America instead is a betrayal of trust. The Taliban's co-founder and Deputy Prime Minister Abdul Ghani Baradar dismisses reports of him being injured in clashes. The denial follows days of rumours that supporters of Baradar clashed with members of the Haqqani network. The United Nations says any suggestion it can solve Afghanistan's problems is a fantasy. The UN insists its capacity to mediate for a more inclusive Taliban government is limited. China claims to have fully vaccinated more than 1 billion people, or 71% of its population, against COVID-19. Meanwhile, Pope Francis says he's puzzled as to why so many people, including some cardinals in the Roman Catholic Church, refuse to get inoculated against COVID-19, calling the vaccines a friend of humanity and urging others to get the jabs for the common good. In a thinly veiled bid to counter China, the United States, United Kingdom and Australia have formed a new Indo-Pacific security alliance. It'll be known as AUKUS, and it aims to share intelligence, defence and technology between the three nations. AUKUS will also help equip Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. The leaders stress that Australia will not be getting nuclear weapons, but will be rather using the propulsion systems for the vessels to guard against future threats. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says that the submarines will be built in Adelaide in close cooperation with the United States and Britain.
Our world is becoming more complex, especially here in our region, the Indo-Pacific. This affects us all. The future of the Indo-Pacific will impact all our futures. To meet these challenges, to help deliver the security and stability our region needs, we must now take our partnership to a new level. A partnership that seeks to engage, not to exclude, to contribute, not take, and to enable and empower, not to control or coerce. And so, friends, AUKUS is born. A new enhanced trilateral security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. AUKUS, a partnership where our technology, our scientists, our industry, our defence forces are all working together to deliver a safer and more secure region that ultimately benefits all.
The new security alliance could deepen a growing chasm in US-China ties. Beijing sees the new alliance as a provocative move. China's repeatedly slammed the Biden administration for its aim to refocus US foreign policy on the Pacific. Washington and its allies are looking to push back against Beijing's growing power and influence. None of the three leaders, however, mentioned China as they launched the alliance, and US officials say the move is not aimed at countering Beijing. Biden, however, in his speech said the new trilateral partnership would address the current environment in the region.
Today, we're taking another historic step to deepen and formalize cooperation among all three of our nations, because we all recognize the imperative of ensuring peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific over the long term. We need to be able to address both the current strategic environment in the region and how it may evolve, because the future of each of our nations, and indeed the world, depends on a free and open Indo-Pacific enduring and flourishing in the decades ahead.
Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson calls it a momentous decision for Australia to acquire the technology. He says it will make the world safer. He's been making a statement in the House of Commons here in London, and Boris Johnson said to MPs that the UK, Australia and United States are now inseparable partners in a project that will last decades. Responding to opposition leader Keir Starmer, Johnson said the initiative is not about confronting China, but about supporting the UK's allies.
Australia has for the first time taken the momentous decision to acquire a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines, and they've asked for our help in achieving this ambition. I'm delighted to tell the House that we've agreed to this request, and we shall place the UK's expertise in this field amassed over decades at the assistance of our Australian friends. The first task of AUKUS will now be an 18-month trilateral collaboration to determine the best way of delivering advanced nuclear submarines for Australia, emphasising, of course, that they will be powered by nuclear reactors, not armed with nuclear weapons. AUKUS is not intended to be adversarial towards any other power, Mr. Speaker, but it merely reflects the close relationship that we have with the United States and with Australia, the shared values that we have, and the sheer level of trust between us.
Well, Beijing has called the agreement an extremely irresponsible threat to geopolitical stability.
美英向澳大利亚出口高度敏感的核潜艇技术，再次证明他们将核出口作为地缘政治博弈的工具，采取双重标准，这是极其不负责任的行径。
Also on the list of people not particularly pleased, New Zealand. Prime Minister Jacinda Arden says that New Zealand is uninterested in building nuclear-powered submarines.
But we have an independent foreign policy. We'll take our own view on foreign policy issues. We'll continue to make a contribution, but our lens is very much peace, stability and a rules-based order. That'll always be the case.
The biggest loser due to this new Indo-Pacific security partnership may well be France. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison confirmed that Canberra had scrapped a $66 billion submarine deal with Paris. The French Foreign and Defence Ministers have issued a joint statement on the developments, saying that Australia's decision to revoke the contract went against the spirit of cooperation between the two countries. It comes just over a week before Joe Biden is due to host a first in-person meeting of leaders of the so-called Quad group of countries, Australia, India, Japan and the US, that Washington sees as key to countering China. These developments could also favour India as it strengthens opposition to China's assertiveness in the region. For more on this, let's go across to Lucy Hoff, who is joining us now live from Brussels. And Lucy, just how angry is France with Australia?
Ollie, France has not pulled any punches this morning in making it very clear how angry it is. The French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has been on French radio describing this as a stab in the back, a betrayal and behaviour from the United States that was more akin to the Trump White House, not something that would have been expected from the Biden administration. This was a deal that was signed between Canberra in Australia and France back in 2016, a deal for submarines worth 66 billion US dollars that has been beset with problems, both sides blaming the other for slowness in that program. But the fact that French officials were only consulted about this new deal 2 weeks ago and then undermined during the announcement yesterday has caused fury and certainly has been perceived in Paris as a betrayal of trust. And that is very much the message given that joint statement that has been also published today from French defence ministers.
And what does this mean for relations, Lucy, between the UK and France?
Well, Boris Johnson has addressed this in the British House of Commons today, saying that Britain stood still rock solid in terms of its relations with France, that it stood alongside its closest neighbour when it comes to NATO, its operations in Estonia or in Sahel in Africa. But whether or not that's the way that France perceives this remains to be seen. I mean, certainly the French have made it clear that they feel betrayed, not just by the United States, but by Westminster as well. Certainly French and UK relations have been at a low point, not least due to COVID-19 travel restrictions, cooperation on areas like Brexit, and certainly this will be yet another flashpoint in relations that are perceived to be at a low ebb.
And Lucy, this all comes at a slightly awkward moment for the European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy.
That's right. I mean, on the same day that Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, put forward her major strategy for the EU's priorities, of which the strategy for the Indo-Pacific was set out and will be given in more detail in just a few minutes by the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell. Just a few hours later, we had this announcement from the US, the UK and Australia. The sense today is that the EU has been completely blindsided by this. A spokesperson for the EU's Foreign Policy Department said that they had not been consulted on this, that they were seeking more information. So really a sense that the EU feels very much sidelined in this process. Now, in terms of the EU strategy for the Indo-Pacific region, it is due to lay out a strategy to boost its influence in that region, cooperating with countries such as Japan and Singapore in terms of supply chains, in terms of trade links, in terms of defence investments. But clearly, in contrast with the scale of the operation from AUKUS, the EU's strategy is looking pretty awkward today.
OK, thank you, Lucy. That's WION's Lucy Hoff reporting from Brussels. Next to Afghanistan, and after his sudden disappearance that fueled speculation about serious injury or even death, the co-founder and now Deputy Prime Minister of the interim cabinet of the Taliban, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, has come out on video to try and dispel rumours about infighting within the group. Baradar appeared in a video interview on state TV, which has been posted on Twitter by the Taliban's political office in Doha. He denied reports that he was hurt in a clash with the Haqqanis, a faction of the Taliban.
No,
this is not true. I'm okay and healthy. The media says that there are internal disputes. There is nothing between us. It is not true. Thank God there is kindness and mercy among us, which would not exist were it not a family. The sacrifices and difficulties that we suffered for several years was for the end of occupation. It was not for power or position.
Taliban officials have issued repeated denials in recent days that Baradar had been hurt or killed. He says he was on a trip when the visit took place and had not been able to get back in time.
We were on a trip, therefore we could not meet, and it was not possible to return from our trip and meet the foreign minister. If we were informed in advance, we could have joined other friends for that meeting.
On Wednesday, Anas Haqqani, younger brother of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the Taliban's newly appointed acting interior minister, also issued a statement denying reports of internal rifts in the movement.
In recent days, a part of this propaganda circulating on news is that, God forbidden, there was a dispute between us and the distinguished leader Mullah Baradar over the posts. I would like to clarify that the people should not pay attention to these rumors. The Mujahideen and compatriots know that the members of the emirate are not like individuals of other institutions.
There had been speculation about rivalries between the Haqqani faction and leaders from the political office in Doha like Baradar, who led diplomatic efforts to reach a settlement with the United States. The United Nations was founded in 1945, just after the Second World War, intended to maintain international peace and security. But in 2021, the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, admits his organisation will not be able to solve the crisis in Afghanistan because it has little capacity to mediate. He's also taken a swipe at the United States and other NATO members for failing in Afghanistan, despite an abundance of funds and soldiers. The Pentagon spent $1 trillion in the last 20 years to only see the Afghan government and military it supported collapse as it pulled out.
Well, I think there is an expectation that is unfounded. I mean, we have a number of countries that have used hundreds of thousands of soldiers for decades, that have spent trillions for decades. And to think that even if they have failed with all these resources to fix the problems of Afghanistan, the UN can now, without that money and without those forces, the UN can now solve the problems that they didn't solve for decades, is of course a fantasy.
When it comes to future mediation with the Taliban, the United Nations says it's not expecting miracles. But Guterres says the world should not strangle Afghanistan and that the people there are on the verge of a dramatic humanitarian disaster. The UN chief says governments around the world need to find ways to inject cash into the Afghan economy and help vulnerable people. Meanwhile, the head of the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan has held a meeting with the Taliban government's Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani. The UN official stressed the need for UN humanitarian workers to be able to work in the country without intimidation. Half of Afghanistan's population is already in need of aid. 14 million people are thought to be on the brink of starvation. The Taliban's been quick to claim the UN can continue its relief measures without any hurdles. But Taliban commitments are being viewed with suspicion after it backtracked on other promises such as protecting the rights of women. Pope Francis has once again urged people to get inoculated against COVID-19 for the common good, but he's admitted there is vaccine hesitancy even within the ranks of the Catholic Church.
Pope Francis said on Wednesday he was puzzled why so many people, including some cardinals in the Roman Catholic Church hierarchy, have refused to get inoculated against COVID-19. The Pope was responding to a question from a reporter about vaccine hesitancy aboard a plane returning from Slovakia.
It's a bit strange because humanity has a history of friendship with vaccines. When we were children, we had the vaccine for measles and others, polio, and nobody protested. Then came all this.
Francis, who has been vaccinated against COVID, has often urged others to get inoculated for the common good. On the plane, he said perhaps some people were afraid at first because there were various vaccines available, and some turned out to be, quote, little more than distilled water. He did not name any vaccines. He went on to say that even some within the high ranks of the Catholic Church are experiencing vaccine hesitancy.
Even in the College of Cardinals, there are some deniers, and one of those poor people is hospitalized with the virus. There's a need for clarity and to talk calmly with these people. In the Vatican, we are all vaccinated except for a small group, and we are studying how to help them.
Cardinal Raymond Brooke, a conservative and vaccine skeptic, was hospitalized in the United States last month after contracting the virus. Some conservative anti-vaccine bishops, particularly in the United States, have said Catholics should have the possibility of claiming conscientious objection to the vaccine on religious grounds. But the Pope has made clear in the past that he disagrees, never having mentioned the option.
SpaceX has become the first aerospace company to launch an entire crew of non-astronauts into Earth's orbit. The world's first all-civilian space tourism flight has blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
SpaceX launched the world's first all-civilian crew spacecraft into Earth's orbit on Wednesday. It took off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida's Cape Canaveral just before sunset and then roared up into darkness. On board was billionaire e-commerce executive Jared Isaacman alongside 3 crewmates and no professional astronauts. They were strapped into the rocket's capsule, dubbed Resilience, wearing helmeted black and white flight suits, and a thumbs-up signaled they'd enter orbit almost 10 minutes after blastoff. Cheers erupted in SpaceX's Mission Control Center. The mission aims for a maximum orbit of nearly 400 miles above Earth. That's higher than both the International Space Station and Hubble Space Telescope. It's also the furthest any human has flown since NASA's 1972 Apollo moon mission. The flight is expected to last about 3 days. Mission officials say it will then splash down in the Atlantic. The launch marks the debut of SpaceX owner Elon Musk's orbital tourism business, embraced by NASA. Before Wednesday's launch, the space agency tweeted, quote, #Inspiration4 embodies our vision for a future in which private companies can transport cargo and people to low Earth orbit. More opportunities to fly equals more opportunities for science. Time magazine has estimated Isaacman's 4 tickets cost $200 million.
How tall is the world's tallest teenager? What's the most skips over a person's own head in 30 seconds? I ask because the annual Guinness World Records 2022 book is out, complete with some of the most unthinkable feats.
My name is Pratik Moite. I am world shortest competitive bodybuilder. My height is 3 feet and 4 inches.
I'm Maria Wattel. I'm from the Netherlands, and I am the world's tallest professional female bodybuilder.
Hello, I am Elizabeth. I'm Katarina. And we are the shortest living female twins of the world.
Think of the most unimaginable feat that you can. Anything at all. Chances are that it has already found a place in this year's edition of the Guinness World Records 2022. Yes, the annual publication is out, with a collection of some of the most outlandish world records, like the dog with the longest ears, the world's tallest teenager, the fastest walking on hands, and the most skips over a person's own hair in 30 seconds.
To be a Guinness World Record title holder, to me that means that, one, I'm an elite, I'm one of the top dogs, but at the same time it also means that my family's winning, my town's winning, and my support group's winning, because without them I wouldn't be here doing this for you guys.
If you can think it, chances are somebody somewhere in the world has done it. And that is exactly the kind of content the Guinness World Records 2022 book is bringing to your coffee table.
It feels incredible to achieve a Guinness World Record title. It's something that I never even considered doing. I always used to get the books when I was little and used to read through them and just look at all the incredible things that people could do. And so it's kind of surreal to then know that I have gotten a record title, and to see that in the book there's my name and that I've got the certificates. It makes you pinch yourself a little bit.
Getting all the data for this edition was a feat in itself, considering that the world had hit pause due to the pandemic. The Guinness World Records team worked in keeping with all the prescribed safety measures to put together this collection.
I see a page that is the tallest teenager, and he wasn't tall as me, so I was like, oh, maybe I can get it, and I get it, so.
With a special focus on the environment for this edition, the Records book consists of 10 chapters. Here's a list of some of the areas of focus. Make a difference with the environmental champions, the eco-warriors fighting to secure a future for our planet. Take a trip around the most amazing parks, cultural sites and museums with the virtual visits. Hear the powerful voices of our young achievers, all under 16. These young editors, athletes, influencers and scientists are shaping the future. Each replete with facts, images, trivia and more, the Guinness World Records 2022 book is a journey in itself, encapsulating amazing human beings, extraordinary animals, wondrous feats and cutting-edge technology. Just like Louis Armstrong, one can't help but look at these records and think, what a wonderful world. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
And with that, we'll call it a wrap for this edition of WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett. Thanks very much, as ever, for being with us. Do join us at the same time again tomorrow. In the meantime, for more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.
There are many other...